Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Mursalin wa ala alihi asma'in. Honorable moderator, Brother Qasim, respected fellow presenters, and dear audience, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is Faisal Khan. As Brother Shahran Qasim already mentioned about me, I got my PhD from IIM and with the generous support from Triple IT. So you can call me a Triple IT scholar too. Today I am going to present on Islam and sustainable development, analyzing the connections in the Malay world. In this presentation, outline is like that: introductory remarks, then I will have a brief literature review on religion and sustainable development that I would like to see the Malay world and Islam, and then I'll discuss about the analyzing the connection between Islam and sustainable development. To discuss this connection, I will try to show an Hifzuddin index to understand this connection, and finally there would be some concluding remark. Firstly, we can say that development is for human being, and human being is not for development. So any human-centered development model to be sustainable, it must take into account the advantages and disadvantages of human being. And now, if we look at religion, then we see there are some common elements or universal values that hold for all the religions, whether it is Islam, Buddhism, or any other religion. And these values must be followed in pursuing any developmental goal. Thus, religion is very particularly relevant when we talk about sustainable development, when we talk about sustainable development goals, etc. Now, let's look at the religion and sustainable development, how development discourse perceive it or look at it. Basically, development discourse see religion as a like suspicions and often negatively. But in the last 2 decades, if you see a significant portion of research paper or academic works that talking about religion in the development analysis. And when we talk about sustainable development, then we see basically it has 3 dimensions: economy, society, and environment. And those are the proponents of sustainable development. They argue these 3 dimensions are interlinked and interdependent, and their balanced integration is very vital when we talk about achieving long-term sustainable development. But now, please look at this sustainable development discourse, then we will find that it is too much focusing on material aspects of life, such as maximizing wealth, talking about production and consumption, but neglected the spiritual aspects of our life. Says, let's say, inculcating religious values in our life in the discussion and debates of achieving sustainable development. So we can say that this too much materialistic focused sustainable development policy has resulted in a global imbalances as far as the achievement of sustainable development is concerned. And that's why we are trying to say that religion is basically the missing pillar of sustainable development. Now, we would like to say why religion is so important to achieve sustainable development. In development economics, value judgment is always play a key role. Todaro says that economics as a social science is concerned with human beings and the social systems by which they organize their activities to satisfy basic material needs such as food, shelter and clothing, and non-material wants such as education, knowledge, spiritual fulfillment. Thus, ethical and normative value premises are central features of economic discipline. So, concepts or goals such as poverty, hunger, equality all derive from the subjective value judgment about what is good and desirable and what is not. So, in defining value, what is good and what is bad, religion has always been one of the most important sources as found in the civilizational history. But now look at the development in the 1950s and 60s. That time, many countries who got independence from the colonization, but they followed modernization or secularization thesis in order to grow or prosper or develop their country. So in this modernization and secularization hypothesis is talking about there is a declining role of religion in society while pursuing development activities. However, If we talk about development activities, some other parts of the world, they have challenges this thesis, especially if we talk about the Malaysian case, as Professor Aslam Hanif, he mentioned that the simple declining in religion hypothesis may not apply in Malaysian case. Rather, religion has huge potential in development as the supplier of values and the policy and institutional reforms. As also highlighted our first speaker today, Sister Nurul Bilkis. Because religion guide human behavior includes economic, social and political in many parts of the world. So development model cannot be effective if religion as an important determinant is ignored. So from this literature review, the central thesis of this paper is religion being a major source of values can play a positive and complementary role in achieving sustainable development. And specifically, this paper is going to explore the religion sustainable development nexus through the historic lens of the Islam in the Malay world, and strongly argues from the Malay world experience that Islam as a religion is very relevant to the sustainable development agenda. So now let's look at the demographic feature of Malay world and Islam. Malay world or Dunia Malayu is a concept that has several different notions, either as a racial category, as a linguistic group, or as a political cultural group. Approximately there are 242 million Muslims live in these 11 South Asian nations, and they consist of 42% of the entire population. And Muslims can be said as the biggest religious group in the Malay world, followed by the Buddhist. And Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei Darussalam are the three major Muslim majority countries in this region. Now let's look at this table that talking about the religious diversity index score of Southeast Asian countries. Religious diversity score is prepared about 8 major religions of the world, how it presents in a particular country, how many. So based on this it is considered. So in Singapore is a very high in terms of religious diversity index, so there are more religious groups are visible, while Malaysia is a high, Brunei moderate, and Indonesia is low, because there is, let's say here from the results we see 87% are Muslims, only around 10% is Christian. So mainly only two religions consist the whole population. So around 600 million population in Southeast Asia, 242 millions are Muslims. That is around 42%, as I said earlier. So now we would like to say Islam and Malay world from the perspectives of three waves of globalizations, as discussed by scholar Osman Bakr in his 2010 paper. The first wave, as he discussed, there are 500 years, beginning from the 11th century to beginning of 16th century. In this 500 years, this globalization process initiated and dominated by Islam, and Islam became most dominant civilization in the Malay world from its introduction. And second wave is actually 450 years, beginning from 16th century until Second World War in 1945. So within these 450 years, we see expansion of Islam and civilization was in progress in the Malo-Indonesian archipelago, the arrival of Portuguese and other Western powers resulting in the colonizations of the regions. And we also see that there is a decline of the Muslim civilization within this colonizing period. And the third wave is actually from this, after this Second World War until today, and this is dominated by American civilizations and witnesses the presence of Southeast Asian Islam in various domains of public life. And from all these analyses of the three waves of globalizations, Osman Bakr argues that Islam in the Malay world has been significantly impacted by each of the three waves. Now, from this globalizational history, what we can, we can see in the first wave of globalizations, Islam basically coming to Malaysian or Malay world through twin forces. Firstly, trade and second, missionary activity. Trade begins first, then missionary activities followed. Muslim traders came to this region from the Middle East via India as well as from China. So now you can see there is a connectivity from Middle East to South Asia to China and to Malaysia. The Malay archipelago lies on the ancient trade route between Arabia and China. So around the mid 13th century, missionaries, mainly Sufis from Makkah, arrived to propagate Islam, and a Malay ruler followed by the kingdoms of Aceh and Sumatra were also converted to Islam. Thus, first Malay Islamic state was established in the second half of 13th century. Now, in 14th and 15th century, there are several Malay sultanates for like Brunei, Malacca, and Patani were also established. Within this period, Malacca emerged as the most powerful, prosperous kingdom and a global cosmopolitan city-state in the region. Besides being one of the world's busiest ports and with a strong trade relation with China, India, and Middle East, Malacca was also an intellectual center attracting Arab, Persian, and Indian religious scholars and a regional center for propagating Islam. And in 15th century, Chinese Muslims also contributed significantly to the Islamization process in the Malay world. So from these globalization perspectives, what we can learn some common essential elements that can contribute to achieve sustainable developments. Basically, we can utilize optimally the interconnectedness of the human activity on a global scale, increasing interdependence of our world, and the spread of trans-border practices in various domains for achieving sustainable developments. For that to happen, we must identify the common forces, economic or otherwise, common objects, tangible or maybe otherwise, to pursue our common goals, let's say MDGs and followed by SDGs. Now, when we talk about the connection between Islam and sustainable development, I would like to highlight it from the perspectives of an index that I developed as one of the part in my thesis that I called it Hifzuddin Index. So to develop this index, we have two stages. Firstly, conceptual stage that has operational definition of sustainable development and Hifzuddin. So identifying components and elements from these operational definitions. From this, we will choose the indicators and then mathematical expression of Hifzuddin index. And at the measurement scale, we have to collect data, then we handle missing data normalizations, and calculating based on the formula discussed in the conceptual stage. So now, let me just read out how we operationally define sustainable development and Hifzuddin in our work. Especially, there are many definitions in social sciences. So you cannot, work if you don't define operationally for the sake of, your paper. So how we develop sustainable development definitions, we combined and synthesized from the definition of sustainable development by Cantor, definitions of Islamic economics by Professor Aslam Hanif, and definition of Maqasid Sharia based on the development by Chopra in 1993. So we combine these three into one. Then we tell that social, economic, and environmental development for the human well-being or Fala that meets the material and spiritual needs of current society without compromising or limiting future development and growth based on the values, norms, laws, and institutions found in and derived from the sources of knowledge in Islam. So this is our sustainable development definitions, which is remarkably different than the conventional notions of sustainable development, because we bring the issue of sources of knowledge in Islam, we issue of values, norms, etc. When we talk about Hifzuddin, we talk about preserving a way of life, because Deen for Islam is a way of life, not just as mentioned in many ways people understand religions. It is far beyond that. We talk about a way of life when we talk about Deen. So when we talk about Hifzuddin, it means we talk about preservation of a way of life that encompass the belief system, acts of worship, and moral and ethical values and conduct at the individual, society, and state level. So from this, we have, let's say, three components of this Hifzuddin: belief system, acts of worship, and moral and ethical values and conduct. So to represent value system we have 5 indicators how much religion matters: believe in God and Muhammad, believe in angel, believe in heavens, believe in hell. Then for acts of worships, we have 4 indicators: prayer, frequency, mosque attendance, fasting in Ramadan, and giving alms, especially zakat. And for moral and ethical aspects, we cover by 2 indicators, that is generosity and cleanliness. So to represent cleanliness, we basically talking about corruption perception index. We say that perceived level of public sector corruption when it is very clean means it is very least corrupted country. So that's how we perceive. So from these all 11 indicators, we have come up with this Hifzuddin index, and you see here is the result. Actually, we have only covered 29 OIC member countries. As you know, OIC consists of 57 countries. Why we cover only 29 countries? This is basically limitations of data. When we would like to work on OIC countries, this is a significant challenge I have faced every stages of data collections. Many countries doesn't have all data that required to calculate their human Hifzuddin index. So here we only presented the top 10 countries who are in ranked in Hifzuddin index. You see Indonesia ranked first, and their value is 84. Then Malaysia is second. Then Nigeria is third. You see basically majority of the countries in the top 10 are from the African regions. Basically they are not the rich countries. They are basically low income countries. Some are maybe lower middle income countries. So from this we can easily see that modernization hypothesis is already work there. Why? Those countries who are not economically rich, they are very good in terms of their scoring in Hifzuddin. But there is a remarkable departure here that I would like to highlight here in this quadrant. So we say Malaysia and to some extent Indonesia is the outlier, and they are actually the hope for the Muslim world in the 21st century. Why? You see here in this quadrant we have 2 index. One index is Hifzuddin index, just I calculated, and in another side, in the horizontal side, is human development index. So that is mostly widely popular index in the world. So you see basically the first quadrant is most desirable quadrant, because we would like to high in Hifzuddin index. At the same time we would like to also develop humanly in this index. So you see majority of these top 10 countries you see are Nigeria, Cameroon. They are good in terms of Hifzuddin index, but their performance in development is very low, while Morocco, Pakistan and Iraq is medium, but Indonesia is high, very high. So these 2 countries are basically from Southeast Asian nations. So that's why I would like to say that when we talk about development with the preservations of religious values, South Asian nations, especially Indonesia, Malaysia and Brunei, also are the model countries for the Muslim world, because these countries are developed. At the same time they are preserving better their way of life in terms of Hifzuddin. So from this I would like to conclude that religion is a part of culture, the way we do things, the way we do believe, the way we do practice. If the culture is considered, then development should be consistent with religion. Unlike the secularization process and modernization thesis of the West, the development experience of Southeast Asian countries also suggests this. So we strongly recommend that religion should be taken as an important social institution in the process of sustainable development. And in terms of civilization and culture, the Malay world, home to the more than 240 million Muslims, is certainly an important reason for the Southeast Asian Islam. For demographic and political economic reasons alone, Southeast Asian Islam easily qualifies as a major geo-global cultural branch of global Ummah. Given the strategic importance, political stability, sustained economic development, and immense natural and human resources, it is believed that Southeast Asian Islam has a better chance in the Islamic world to play a decisive role in influencing and shaping the 21st century Islam. So the Muslim intellectual should further investigate Islam's significant contributions to the development of the Malay world civilization that will eventually provide a way forward to achieving sustainable development in these regions and other parts of the Muslim world. Thank you very much for patiently hearing my lecture.